Just over 12 months ago, I made a pretty big change. I was in my 40s, working full time. I'd been sedentary really for many years. I smoked, drank too much, and I realised that now it was time to shift gears. Fast forward 12 months and I've completed my first Hyrox. I can run a sub 45 10k. I play competitive football every weekend with people over half my age. And perhaps most importantly, I feel fitter, healthier and more energetic than I have done in years. On this video, I want to share how I did it. How you can start hybrid training in your 40s. To make it easy, I'm going to break it down into 6 areas. So let's dive in. Number 1, why I chose hybrid training. First, let's talk about why I ended up taking the approach of hybrid training. After turning 40, things were different. My energy levels were dropping. I wasn't moving much. I found climbing stairs to be difficult, and keeping up with my children was, pretty much impossible. My career had took me to a place where I had a desk job and I was gaining weight. I realised I needed more than just the occasional long walk. I needed something that kept me engaged, that had multiple modalities and could bring out that healthy but competitive streak in me. So what does hybrid training mean to me? Well, it's about combining strength and functional training along with endurance, and then making sure that inside of all of that is plenty of mobility and recovery. It's not just about lifting weights or running. It's a blended approach, meaning that I am able to do multiple sports, but the main draw for me is that somebody in their 40s is able to maintain a functionally fit and active lifestyle that will benefit me into my 50s and beyond. So over the last year, I've found many benefits to hybrid training. I have way more energy than I used to. The days where I used to slump after work or struggle to stay awake in an evening have long gone. Now I don't find the idea of going to the gym or going for a bike ride to be anything that's daunting. I've lost weight, but I've done it in a healthy way. I've gone from 78 kilos down to roughly 70 to 71 kilos that I am now. My body moves better, it aches less. I feel younger, and I'm chasing physical challenges that 12 months ago I wouldn't have dreamed of, like Hyrox or running 10Ks. Honestly, I haven't felt this good physically since my early 30s. I've noticed that my mental health has improved. Training now gives me structure, it gives me a sense of achievement, but overall the endorphins that it releases means that my mental health and overall mood has significantly improved. And finally, my motivation is back. I've gone from, I don't think I'd be able to do that, to bring it on, what's next? Number 2, the key components of hybrid training. I took some time to think about this, and I think I can break this down into 4 pillars. Functional strength, endurance, mobility and recovery, and lifestyle integration. Let's start with functional strength. This for you might mean gym sessions and weightlifting, but I personally have developed this from a more traditional bodybuilding or powerlifting approach to a more functional strength approach. This means that my strength training mainly focuses on dumbbells and kettlebell workouts that focus on the mobility and the functional strength, with the movements being under load. I found that doing this builds muscle that supports my performance goals, but it also supports my joints and boosts my metabolism. Look, let's face it, as you get older, muscle loss becomes real, so strength training is just a non-negotiable. Next is endurance. Look, this can be running, cycling, swimming, whatever it is that you want to do. It builds that cardiovascular system, and it means that events like Hyrox are possible. So for an example, for me, I progressively built my runs up so I could run a sub 45 10k. But at the same time, I'm conscious that I'm in my 40s, so I've swapped things like my long runs for long cycles. A lot less taxing on the joints, and means it's something I can do sustainably. And then we move on to mobility and recovery. Now look, that's something I never really considered in my 20s. In fact, it's something I didn't consider at the beginning of this particular journey. But dynamic stretching and mobility drills are really important to sustain the hybrid athletic lifestyle, especially again, somebody who's in their 40s. Finally, integrating it into your lifestyle. I, like many, have a full-time job, I have a busy life, I have many commitments, and that means the training has to fit into your schedule. Sleep, nutrition and stress management really do matter with this. I have and continue to tinker with how I fit everything in, but what I can say, it is very much possible with a little bit of careful thinking. And look, the good news is you don't need to work out 2 to 3 times every day in order to achieve it. You just need to plan smartly, and we'll talk about that next. Number 3, how I structured my training. I'm not going to give you an example program or a training split, because quite frankly, everybody is different, and what worked for me may not work for you. And at the root of it, that's pretty much what hybrid training is. It's about taking the right approach for you. But let's talk about some principles and how you could think about it. I've learned a lot over the last 12 months. My weeks look a lot different now than they did when I started. Now that I've built a much stronger base and body, I can average 6 to 7 sessions a week, sometimes training twice a day. But I did this over time, gradually increasing each week. Currently, as I'm chasing a fast time at Hyrox, I am doing event-specific workouts. There's an example of this on my channel where I do a Hyrox workout from home. But alongside this, I am still doing running workouts and functional strength workouts. So let's talk about some important principles that you might want to consider. Finding time is difficult, but if you're serious, you will find the time to work out before work or after work. I found that prepping my gear the night before and preparing things like overnight oats make doing those workouts a lot easier. You have to focus on consistency rather than intensity for the first 3 to 4 months. It's all about establishing healthy habits. There will definitely be days where you wake up and think, I'm not working out today. Skipping one day won't hurt. But if you do that, then you're already starting a bad habit, which will be very difficult to break later on. Increase the volume gradually. Don't go from 0 to 10k in a week. Also, don't focus too much on pace or distance at first. Aim to run for 30 minutes. Then the week after that, increase that to 35 minutes. And so on, until you build the right habits and your body starts to adapt. And don't just incorporate functional training relevant to any of the events you have coming up. When I was training to run a 10k at sub 45, I didn't drop my upper body workouts. I dropped the intensity, but not the workouts themselves. Number 4, common challenges for 40 plus beginners and how I overcame them. So let's talk about some hurdles that you will probably face, and I certainly did. Training in your 40s or beyond comes with some extra challenges, especially compared to when you were in your 20s. And look, you have to accept this early on, something I didn't do. But accepting this doesn't mean that you need to hold back and limit what you're building up to do. You just need to think a lot smarter. Here are some of the things I ran into and how I overcame them. One of my first challenges was time and how busy I am. You may have a full-time job, you may have a family, you may have other commitments that you need to be present for. But this is just something you need to find a way to overcome. For me, I kept my sessions efficient. They would be between 30 and 60 minutes. I predominantly do mine early in the morning, and I find that doing cardio earlier is a lot easier. I can then do strength or my functional training later on in an evening. I found that batch preparing meals. I will do overnight oats for the week, which means I don't have to think about breakfast in the morning. And I treat my training as a non-negotiable appointment. I have to be there. And another tip, especially if you do have a family, is discuss it with them. Get their support. It makes life a lot easier. My second challenge was that recovery is slower. Look, you don't bounce back as quickly as you used to. And although as you get fitter, your recovery becomes quicker, you always have to be thinking, how does my body feel? And that just meant I had to take more time to recover. I added mobility days, but I prioritise sleep. I get at least 8 hours sleep a night now. I also prioritise my nutrition. I made sure that my body's getting enough calories and the right types of food in order for me to sustain a hybrid training approach. And if my body is telling me that I need to take it easier, well then I do. This means that my training in the long term won't suffer. My third challenge was getting over the initial inertia. After being sedentary for many years really, and very low activity levels, getting started was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And this wasn't just physically, it was also mentally. I spent lots of mornings at 6 a.m. nursing a coffee, thinking of any way I could get out of going for a run. And look, I find that it is mindset. And to be honest with you, you either want it or you don't. If you want it, then you can overcome pretty much any of these challenges. If you don't, then there is no way that you're able to sustain this journey. But look, at the same time, it takes time. Old habits are hard to break. The days of staying in bed for as long as you can or sitting down in an evening just have to change. And they have to be replaced with morning runs or strength training sessions. My fourth challenge was fearing that I was too old. I put my fitness rebuild off for far too long. I was approaching my 40s, thinking I'm too old to play football again, too old to start building muscle. And look, I've earned the right to have a bit of extra fluff now, but thinking back, this was quite ridiculous. So I educated myself. I used well-structured workouts, ones that I'd researched through things like YouTube. I started to warm up properly. I started to incorporate mobility. I recovered better. And I didn't compare myself to younger athletes. I just compare myself to me. And I compete against me and nobody else. And the fifth challenge I found was getting the nutrition right. My primary goals at first were to lose weight and body transformation. I think these are relatable goals to anybody who was in my situation. But I did realise early on the link between what the goals I was setting and the nutrition I needed to achieve those goals. I wasn't completely new to this. In my 20s, I had a very reasonable level of fitness where I incorporated weight training and nutrition. So I had an idea of what I needed to do. I straight away increased my protein intake and I went into a very slight calorie deficit. And this meant that I was able to lose the weight that I wanted to. And very quickly I moved into a maintenance stage, which is where I am today. So look, these are some of the challenges you may face. And if you address these, then you're going to give yourself a much better chance of success, especially if you're starting out in your 40s like me. Number 5, my results and how you can track your own. So although my main reason for doing this is my overall health, the competitor in me does strive for results. And look, let's face it, results is a good way to see whether what you're doing is actually working or not. So after 12 months of hybrid training, what are my results? Well, I recently ran a sub 45 10k and I can run a sub 22 5k. This is a long way from where I originally started. I've just completed my first Hyrox event in 1 hour and 23 and I can play 90 minutes of football with people half my age and still walk the next day. I've lost weight, but I've also improved my body composition. I feel younger and more energetic and I have better mental clarity. And I can now go for a run, a cycle, functional training, play football, do all these different type of modalities and enjoy it. And perhaps most importantly, I can keep up with my kids now and I don't get tired going up some stairs. The beauty of hybrid training is you pick your own measurables for your own results. But before I give some suggestions, there is a word of caution. Setting measurable goals is fine, but you need to be aware of how you're going to actually achieve them. And what I mean by that is if your goal is to lift a certain amount of weight, then you need to know how to do that properly, but also safely. So taking that into account, maybe you could consider some of these. You could pick 1 or 2 goals. So you could aim to run a 5k, or you could set a strength benchmark, such as 10 pull-ups, or the time it takes you to run the 5k. You could just do it on feel. How do I feel after doing a certain exercise? So how do I feel after I've rode 30k on my bike, for example? And then what you can do is then retest this every 3 to 4 weeks and celebrate that you will undoubtedly have progression and success. But also the success is not just about how fast or how long you can do something, it's about how it's made you feel. Do you feel better in yourself? Is your mental health better? Do you just feel like you've got more energy? These are also results that you can measure how effective your training is. Number 6, how to get started today. Look, if you've got this far, then obviously hybrid training could well be the right approach for you. So here's 4 simple steps that you can consider for you to start training in a hybrid way. The first one is to commit. Decide that you are going to do this. No ifs, no buts. You want it and nothing is going to stop you. Begin by training 3 to a maximum of 4 times a week for the next 12 weeks. Put the sessions in your calendar if you have to, but start creating good habits right now. The second one is about mixing your modalities. Divide those 3 to 4 workouts a week into a functional strength workout, into an endurance workout, and into a mobility and recovery workout. If you are doing 4, then you can pick up one of those again. Look, it won't take you long to figure out what works for you and how you're going to approach it, especially if you take into account the things I've said earlier in this video. Number 3 is about keeping it realistic. If you're older and coming from very low activity levels, then sessions of 30 to 45 minutes max are where you start. And then you can gradually increase the fitter and stronger you get. And number 4, and the final one, is, look, pick a mini goal. This shouldn't be anything big. So put those marathons and triathlons on the back burner for now. Look, I chose to be able to complete a 10k race as my mini goal, but you could choose to do your local 5k, or you could choose to do 10 pull-ups, 20 push-ups, and 30 sit-ups, something like that to try and achieve. Because I think having a purpose, having a goal, helps suppress and satisfy that competitor in you, which may mean you go too hard, too fast. And then after those first 12 weeks, you reassess what's working, what's not. Does my body feel like I can start to aim bigger, like competing a Hyrox or running a 10k? Remember, being 40 plus is not about limiting your goals. It's about sustainably being able to improve. And look, if we can do that, then the rest will come. My journey into hybrid training has been life-changing, but it hasn't been without its challenges. It has now become part of me. It's who I am. It's part of my identity. I know that it doesn't just benefit me now, but it is also going to benefit me in my later years. So if you're in your 40s and you're ready to feel younger, fitter, more motivated, then hybrid training could make a huge difference for you. Now, before you go, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel to get more fitness tips and to follow my journey into hybrid training. Remember to drop a comment and tell me about what your training looks like, whether you're ready to take the hybrid training approach or whether you're already on that journey and how you're finding it. Keep moving, keep motivated, and I'll see you on the next one.